I was only 6 when my mother, Joanna, took me deep into the Amazon rainforest. It was the summer of 1993, and my memories are scattered snapshots, blinding green, thick heat clinging to every pore, the buzz of insects louder than city horns. My mother wasn't your typical suburban mom. She was an environmental researcher, a jungle enthusiast, and above all, fiercely independent. She thought the best way to spend the summer was not at Disneyland, but tracing unmarked trails with a notebook and compass. We had flown from our home in Oregon to Manaus, Brazil, where we joined 2 local guides, Felipe and his teenage nephew, Bruno. The plan was to trek deep into the jungle to study endangered medicinal plants. My mom insisted it was perfectly safe. I remember clinging to her arm in the market the day before we left, watching monkeys steal bananas from carts. She smiled down at me and said, "This trip will change your life, baby," and it did. On the 4th day into the forest, we were already far from any village. We hiked through twisting vines, our boots squelching through mud. My mom carried most of our supplies in a canvas backpack. She had braided my hair that morning and tied it with a yellow ribbon so it wouldn't stick to my neck. The ribbon would be important later, but back then, it was just another attempt to keep me cool. Felipe was leading, his machete swinging with precision, clearing the path. Bruno trailed behind, humming to himself, wearing a shirt 2 sizes too big, and holding the GPS device. The trail was getting narrower, the jungle pressing in like a fist. Even the air felt heavier, like it was watching us. Around midday, we reached a small clearing beside a river bend. The water shimmered brown and slow. "We rest here," Felipe announced, already setting down his gear. My mother pulled out our small camping stove to heat water for dehydrated rice, while I sat on a rock and watched dragonflies skim across the surface. Bruno wandered off to collect firewood. That's when I noticed something strange. The jungle had quieted. No birds, no insects, just the low sloshing sound of the river. I remember turning toward my mother to ask if she noticed it too. Her eyes were already scanning the trees. She'd noticed, but before either of us could say anything, Felipe hissed from the riverbank. "Joanna," he said. "Back away slowly." She stood confused. "What is it?" "Anaconda." My mother froze. Her hand reached instinctively for me, and I scrambled to her side. The thick foliage near the water began to ripple. No splashing, just a sinuous, deliberate movement. And then we saw it. The body was as thick as a tree trunk. Green-brown scales glistened like polished leather. It moved with chilling silence, its head rising slowly above the reeds, tongue flicking. The anaconda was at least 25 feet long. Bruno screamed somewhere behind us, but I didn't turn. I couldn't. My feet felt rooted into the earth. The snake didn't strike. Not at first. It hovered, studying us, tongue flicking in and out like it was deciding which one of us would be easiest to take down. Felipe stepped forward, machete raised. "Don't move," my mother whispered to me. Her voice had shifted, controlled panic, like someone reciting instructions during a fire drill, but I couldn't obey. My legs gave out and I fell back with a grunt, just enough to stir the underbrush. That was all it took. The snake lunged. My mother shoved me sideways with a force I didn't know she had. I rolled into a bush as the massive head struck where I'd just been. It moved lightning fast, coiling its thick body toward my mother. She ran backward at first, then turned and bolted toward a fallen tree trunk near the clearing's edge. The anaconda followed, rippling across the ground like a tidal wave of muscle. Felipe swung his machete and landed a solid hit against its flank. A horrible sound, somewhere between a hiss and a scream, filled the air. The snake lashed out, knocking him off his feet with its tail. "Mama!" I screamed, trying to crawl toward her, but a pair of arms yanked me back. It was Bruno. He had returned, terrified, but he held me tight. "No, stay still." From the ground, I watched my mother climb the fallen tree like a gymnast, flipping over it just as the anaconda lunged again. She grabbed a large branch, more like a club, and struck its head as it coiled to follow her. Everything was chaos. Felipe was groaning, half conscious, bleeding from a gash on his head. My mother was panting, circling the trunk as the snake pursued her, wrapping its body around the tree as it climbed. She looked at me once, and even then, even sweating and gasping, her eyes were clear. She wasn't afraid, she was calculating. "Bruno," she shouted, distracted. He hesitated, but then grabbed a flare from Felipe's bag and yanked a pin. A red glow burst into life with a sharp hiss. He waved it at the snake's tail, shouting, "Hey, over here." The snake flinched, turning its massive head toward the light. That was all my mother needed. She leapt from the tree, landing hard beside Felipe, then grabbed the machete from his limp hand and drove it down, not at the snake's head, but at the thick coil looped closest to the base of the tree. The blade sank deep. The snake writhed, coiling tighter, shrieking in that unnatural hiss. Bruno grabbed me and ran toward her, dragging me forward. "Go, run now," she screamed. And we did. We tore through the trees, vines slashing our legs, branches clawing our clothes. Behind us, the sounds of the snake's fury thundered through the jungle like a storm. We didn't stop running until we couldn't hear it anymore. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share and subscribe for more. We didn't stop until the sun began to sink behind the trees, bleeding orange and gold into the thick canopy. My legs burned and my chest felt like it was going to split open. Bruno was ahead of me, pulling me by the wrist, and my mother was right behind us, holding Felipe's arm over her shoulders as he stumbled beside her. The jungle felt endless, green shadows, vines like nooses and sounds we couldn't trust. Every twig crack or rustle made me flinch. We reached a patch of dry ground where the trees thinned slightly. It wasn't safe, not really, but it was the best we could find. My mother gently laid Felipe down, his head resting against her pack. He was bleeding from a cut above his temple, but he was awake now. His breath was ragged, his eyes flicking from face to face. "Anaconda," he muttered. "Still back there," my mother said. "But not dead." None of us said anything for a while. Then Bruno did something smart. He pulled out the emergency radio. It was dented and muddy, but still intact. He clicked it on and started speaking in Portuguese. I didn't understand everything, but I caught a few words: danger, injured, coordinates. My mom took out her map and flashlight, using the edge of her compass to trace a new path. "We were supposed to circle back northeast," she muttered, "but we're off the trail now. Way off, they'll never find us if we just wait here." Felipe grunted, his voice low. "We'll have to move." "In the morning," she said firmly. "We don't move in the dark." That night was the worst night of my life. We didn't pitch tents, we just lay close together under a large tree, trying to stay awake. My mother wrapped her arms around me tightly, her hand resting over my chest to feel my heartbeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that snake again. The way it moved, like water with eyes. Sometime after midnight, a scream tore through the jungle. It wasn't human, more like a high-pitched shriek from some animal we never saw. We all sat up instantly, alert. My mother held her finger to her lips, and I didn't even breathe. It passed, but none of us slept after that. At first light we started walking. Felipe was able to move slowly, but he needed help. Bruno led the way now, machete in hand, slashing a new path while checking the GPS for any sign of a river or rescue team. Around midday, things went from bad to worse. The rain hit us like a bucket to the face. One moment it was humid and still, the next thunder cracking, sky bleeding, rain pounding like fists on our backs. The ground turned slick. Bruno slipped twice, catching himself on branches. I held tight to my mother's shirt as we fought through the underbrush. Then we heard it, a splash. We turned as one and saw movement in the water about 20 yards away. A giant ripple across a flooded stream, long, smooth, fast. The snake was back. My mother grabbed my hand, yelling over the roar of the rain, "Move, now." We ran again, but the mud made everything harder. I slipped and fell face first into the muck, and she yanked me up without stopping. Behind us, the ripple cut through the stream like a black shadow. Closer now. Bruno pointed up ahead. There, rocks. A line of boulders jutted out from the forest floor. High ground. We scrambled up, slipping on moss, clawing our way to the top. The rocks were about 10 feet above the water level, just enough to slow anything that couldn't climb. Felipe collapsed once we reached the top. My mother dropped beside him, panting. "We need a plan," she said, barely able to catch her breath. "It's not going to stop." We waited. The rain kept falling, but softer now. And then we saw it. The Anaconda appeared below us, its head rising from the water slowly, almost casually. It wasn't in a hurry. Its black eyes stared straight at us, unblinking. It circled the base of the rocks, like it was studying its next move. "It's hunting us," Bruno whispered. Felipe tried to sit up, groaning. "We need fire. It hates fire." "But we're soaked," my mom said. "Even if we could get a spark." She stopped. Her eyes lit up just for a second. She looked at Bruno. "The flares. How many do you have?" "2 more," he said. "But they're for emergencies." "This is an emergency," she replied. Bruno pulled out a flare from his belt pack, fingers shaking. He struck it, and bright red fire hissed to life again. The Anaconda flinched slightly, just like before, but didn't retreat. It was smarter this time, watching. My mom stood, flare in hand, and climbed down a few steps toward the base of the rocks. "Keep it busy," she said to Bruno. "I'm going to lead it away." "What?" he said. "You can't." "I have to." "It won't stop." "But it wants me. It remembers." I screamed for her not to go. I grabbed her arm and tried to pull her back, but she kissed the top of my head and whispered, "Be strong, baby. You're braver than you know." Then she stepped off the rock and onto the mud again. A snake followed instantly. She didn't run straight. She zigzagged, waving the flare, shouting, drawing it further into the trees. The last I saw was the red light bouncing through the green, fading into the jungle, and then silence. Isan minutes passed. Isan maybe longer. I was frozen, clutching Felipe's arm. Then a scream cut through the trees, sharp and real. My mom's scream, but then, nothing. No more flare light, no more sounds, just wet jungle and the awful silence. The jungle swallowed her. One moment my mother was there, running, waving the red flare like a sword. The next she was gone, and I was left crouching beside Felipe, heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the rain. Bruno and I waited in stunned silence. The sky had turned gray again, heavy with moisture, and every minute felt like an hour. Finally, Bruno broke the silence. "I'm going after her." He was already halfway down the rocks before I could speak. I shouted after him, but he turned and said, "Stay here with Felipe. If anything happens, use the last flare." And then he was gone too. Now it was just me and Felipe. His shirt was soaked through, his face pale. He looked at me with tired eyes and tried to smile. "You're tough, kid," he said softly. I didn't answer. I didn't feel tough. I felt like a terrified little girl, waiting for the worst. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I counted trees, listened for footsteps. Nothing, just the dripping of water from leaves and the low hum of insects. Then I heard a sound, crashing, someone running. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the flare and pulled the cap off. My hand shook so much, I dropped it once before I got it lit. The red flame burst out with a sharp hiss. "Who's there?" I shouted. Branches split open in front of me, and Bruno stumbled back into the clearing, alone. His shirt was torn, and he had a cut across his forehead, dripping blood down his nose. But it was the look in his eyes that froze me. Empty, shocked. He didn't speak at first, just dropped to his knees and stared into space. I dropped the flare and rushed to him. "Where is she? Where's my mom?" She was still alive when I got to her," he said finally. The snake had her pinned near a tree. She dropped the flare but was fighting, kicking, hitting it with a branch. My throat tightened, and then, he wiped the blood off his face. I distracted it, threw a rock. It turned on me. That gave her time to grab the flare again. She screamed at me to run, said she'd find another way back. I could barely breathe. "So she's still alive?" "I think so," he said. "But I lost her trail. That was enough for me." "We're not leaving without her," I said. "No," he agreed. "But we need a plan." She went west. That's toward the deeper part of the forest. If we go in without knowing where, we could all vanish. We helped Felipe up again and moved to higher ground. We made a camp with some makeshift covering, using a broken tarp and branches. Bruno kept checking the radio. Still no signal. The night came again, quiet and suffocating. No snake this time. No animal sounds. Just wind brushing through leaves and that silence that presses into your ears. At dawn we moved west. I couldn't eat, but Bruno made me chew on some jerky. "Keep your strength," he said. We followed broken branches, bent leaves, pieces of cloth she might have torn on purpose. It was slow, but my mother was smart. She was leaving signs. We followed them for hours until we reached a dry riverbed, and that's where we saw it. Her boot, one of her hiking boots, muddy, torn but definitely hers. Next to it, scuff marks, drag marks. We looked at each other. "She's close," I whispered. Then a branch snapped behind us. Bruno spun instantly, raising his machete, but it wasn't the snake. It was a man. He stepped out from behind the trees, barefoot, sunburnt, wearing only torn shorts and a shoulder bag. He looked startled to see us, his eyes wide, darting between me, Bruno and Felipe. Bruno raised his hands. "We're not a threat." The man didn't speak right away. Then he said in slow, broken English, "You come from river?" "Yes," I said. "Have you seen a woman, short hair, about this tall?" He nodded. "She ran. Big snake." "I help." "You saw her?" I ran toward him. "Where? When?" "Yesterday," he said. "I hide her in cave. Safe. But she hurt." My heart jumped. The man turned and motioned for us to follow. Bruno hesitated. "We don't know him."
"I don't care,"
I said. "She's close." We followed the barefoot man deeper into the woods. He moved fast, slipping between trees like he'd lived here his whole life. Maybe he had. He led us to a cluster of rocks surrounded by heavy vines. There, behind a split stone, was a narrow opening, just wide enough for someone to crawl inside. "She in here," he said. I dropped to my knees and peered in. It was dark, but I saw her, my mother, lying against the far wall, her leg bandaged with strips of cloth, her face dirty, but her eyes open. "Mom!" She sat up instantly. "Nina!" I crawled in first, throwing my arms around her. Bruno came in behind me and crouched next to her. "You're okay," she nodded. "Not great, but alive." The man outside passed in a canteen and some fruit. She took a sip and smiled weakly. "How did you find this place?" Bruno asked. "He found me," she said, pointing toward the man. "He heard me screaming and pulled me out of the brush. I think he's been surviving here for years." We rested a bit before Bruno checked his GPS. "We're far west," he said, "but if we head north now we might catch a supply boat route." "I can walk," my mom said, "just not fast." The barefoot man led us out again, guiding us toward the river. We never saw the anaconda again, but the jungle didn't stop testing us. Slippery slopes, sudden drops, thorny vines, even a colony of ants that bit through our socks. Every hour was a new battle, but we had her back. We didn't talk much on the hike, just focused on moving, one step at a time. When we reached the river, we found a narrow clearing. Bruno tried the radio again. Static, then a crackle, then copy. "Who is this?" We froze. Bruno shouted into the radio. "This is Rescue 4. We have 4 survivors and 1 injured. Coordinates." Bruno rattled them off, hands shaking. "They're sending a boat," he said, turning to us with a grin. We didn't celebrate. Not yet. Not until we were out. Not until we made it home. The river looked calm, but we all knew better. Thick trees framed the muddy banks, and the sun had finally broken through the thick jungle canopy, casting long golden rays over the water. The air was still sticky, but now it carried something new. Hope. We were quiet. Nobody dared to speak the relief we felt, like it might jinx us. My mom leaned against Bruno's side, her arm around his shoulder as she limped forward. Her right leg was tightly wrapped in vines and cloth. It looked bad, swollen and purplish, but she still moved without complaint. The fire in her hadn't dimmed, not even after being nearly crushed by an anaconda in the heart of the Amazon. "I see something," Felipe shouted, pointing downriver. A small black dot was floating in the distance. It was moving, slow and steady. Then another. It was the rescue boat. Bruno grabbed the flare and lit it. The red flame shot up bright even under the sun. He waved it high over his head, yelling into the open air. We watched as the boat grew larger. 2 figures stood on the deck, scanning the trees with binoculars. "They see us," I yelled. The barefoot man stood behind us, silent, still. He had led us all the way here and never once asked for anything. No name, no explanation, just helped as though it was second nature. Bruno turned to him. "You saved her life." The man shrugged. "Do you want to come with us?" my mother asked, breathing hard. "We can help you, get you to a hospital, a home." He shook his head gently and pointed back into the trees. "This is my home." And before any of us could say more, he turned and disappeared into the jungle. Just like that, gone. The boat reached the shore with a loud engine hum. 2 rescue workers jumped down, their eyes wide at the sight of us. "Jesus," one of them muttered, seeing my mom's leg. "You all came from the south." "We were 3 days off course," Bruno said. "You're lucky to be alive," the other man said, shaking his head. "We thought we'd lost you." They helped Mom onto the boat first, easing her onto a stretcher. Felipe followed, and then Bruno and I climbed aboard. As the engine roared to life, I looked back one last time. The trees were still. The place that had almost swallowed us whole now stood silent behind us. We didn't talk much during the ride. I sat next to my mom, holding her hand. She squeezed mine every now and then, not saying a word. By the time we reached the edge of the river outpost, there were news vans, rescue teams, and even a few local villagers waiting. The moment we stepped off the boat, cameras started flashing. Bruno shielded me from the lights as a swarm of reporters rushed forward. "Is it true you were attacked by a giant anaconda? How did you survive that far in the jungle? Who else was with you?" My mother, still on the stretcher, lifted a hand. "One question at a time," she said, her voice cracked but steady. "We were rushed into the outpost clinic. Doctors examined each of us. My mom's leg had deep tissue damage, but no broken bones. Felipe had an infected gash on his arm, and Bruno's ribs were badly bruised, but we were alive. Every one of us." Later that night, the story broke worldwide. Mother and daughter survive Amazon anaconda attack. It ran on every major network. People couldn't believe it. There were headlines like jungle horror, family faces monster snake and miracle in the Amazon. The media turned it into a survival tale no one saw coming, but they didn't know the half of it. The truth was grittier, dirtier, There weren't miracles, just choices. Just people refusing to quit. The most famous footage came from a blurry photo a rescue team member snapped of my mother's leg, clear indentations from the snake's crushing grip still visible, purplish blue. That image went viral. She became the face of survival. Talk shows reached out, book deals were offered, but Mom turned almost all of it down. I didn't do anything heroic, she'd tell them. I just didn't want my daughter to grow up without me. I remember the night we finally flew home. I sat by the airplane window, looking out into the dark sky thousands of feet above the Amazon basin. It looked peaceful from up here. You wouldn't know the things that lived beneath those trees. The plane rattled with light turbulence. My mom reached across the aisle and touched my shoulder. "Do you know why I brought you on that trip?" she asked. I shook my head. "I wanted you to be brave," she said. "Not careless, but strong. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready. You have to be ready for it." I nodded. I didn't really understand everything then, but I never forgot that. Years passed. I grew older, finished school, and eventually became a paramedic. Felipe returned to his village but stayed in touch, sending postcards every few months. Bruno moved to Peru and worked in environmental conservation. He wrote a memoir a few years later, titled The Bite of the Forest, and though he didn't name names, we all knew the story. My mom walked with a slight limp for the rest of her life, but she didn't let it stop her. She hiked again. Never the Amazon, but plenty of trails. She said it was her way of not letting fear win. Sometimes when I told people our story, they didn't believe it. You fought off an anaconda and escaped the jungle." I'd just smile, because that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was that we survived. We faced something people only see in nightmares, and we didn't give up. Not when the radio failed, not when the food ran out, not even when that giant snake tried to end everything. And to this day, people still ask, "How did you survive that?" And I always say the same thing. We didn't just survive, we walked out. If you liked this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, another to strengthen our community. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and what time you are currently watching this video.